Are you not showing your face, Andy?
So, hello and welcome to the third of the Writers Guild of Great Britain mini festival of video games narrative. Tonight's panel is from page to performance, bringing interactive scripts to life, and we'll be exploring the crazy world of what happens with words when they change from that two-dimensional page world into a full glorious performance. Just to reiterate, we don't have the chat working, and that's just for everybody's protection to make sure that you're all safe and sound during here. I'm sure we don't have any trolls out there, but just to make sure. We do, however, have the Q&A, so at any point you want to drop a question to the panel, please do type it in there, and then we will get to those questions as when we get time. So just to give you a quick introduction to the event and to the Writers Guild. We have another two events to come after tonight. We have narrative design tomorrow, and then world building on Friday. And this is being sponsored by Fusebox. So we thank you, Fusebox, for helping us to make this happen. In terms of the Writers Guild, you'll have heard that mentioned a few times. We are a TUC-affiliated union in the UK, representing writers, transmedia writers. We cover writers in television, film, radio, theatre, books, comedy, and beyond. And then we also include video games. We were the first union in the world to form a writing union in the world to form a video games committee. That video games committee is responsible for the video games guidelines, which we draw your attention to. They give you information on rights and conditions for those working in video games narrative. And you also have a chance to be involved. We would always encourage you to join the union. Think of us as a breakdown service that's best to be part of beforehand. So if you need any information on contracts and negotiations, if you want to know about your rights, it's a lonely process being out there as a writer. So if you want to meet other writers, it's a great way of doing that. And we offer full membership, candidate membership, and of course a new student membership, which is there for all people at all levels of their writing career to come and join us. You also have a chance to help shape the industry with the guidelines, because we have a survey which you'll be sent a link to, or you should have already. That's there for you to give us feedback so that we can include this in the revision of the guidelines, which is being undertaken right at the moment. We'll also be sending you a link for the Fusebox mentorship program, and that will come out to you as well. Right, without further ado, talking to everybody out across the world, I will stop sharing that there, and we will ping. Oh, we've got you Greg, there in the middle of the screen there, Adele. We've got a wonderful lineup of speakers here for you this evening. I'm going to be chairing this evening, so I will be handing over to myself now to do that, and I will pass you over now to work our way across the screen, and if you can introduce yourselves one by one as we go across each of the panelists today.
Am I first?
Oh, you are now. Please introduce.
Because I think everyone's screen display is different, so that's why. So, hi guys, I'm Alex Walton-Regan. I'm an actress, and I work a lot in video games, voiceovers, performance capture, motion capture, and I have been doing that for the last decades plus more of my life. So, ask me anything you want.
Hi all, my name's Satish. I'm a former animator. Currently, I teach motion capture, performance capture to game students, animation students, and that's what I did my PhD in. So it's a real passion project for me, and something I'm keen to pass on any information I can to anyone who wants to learn.
Hello, I'm Adele Cutting. I run an audio outsourcing production company called Soundcuts. Prior to that, I worked at EA for 15 years. I primarily work in the games sector, but we also work on branding, idents, installations, and other bits and pieces. My role is generally audio director or voice director or performance director, but we also do sound effects and music too.
Hi, I'm Samantha Bayart. I'm an actor. I've sort of specialised in the niche of sci-fi and fantasy audio for some time now, and in the last few years I've got into games. I've also started a small conference for people who work in games audio called Game Voices Connect, which we shall touch on later because about half of us are in it, and that's next week. Pleased to meet you all.
Don't be shy about that. Say it loud and say it proud.
I think I'm last, aren't I? I'm Sally Beaumont. I'm a voice actor specialising in video games, and I'm also a writer for video games and a playwright. So I'm hoping to kind of be a double agent and bring both of those two experiences to it. And I'm also in the game Voice Connect next week. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being here. You'll see me drop in and out on the video. That's just because I'm multitasking and making sure that everybody gets into the event and everything at the same time. But what I'd like to do is to start off the evening with just looking at what we mean by performance, because it's one word, one very simple word, performance, but it covers a huge range of different skills and areas within video games. So you'll have seen in the warm-up that we've talked a little bit about voiceover and so forth. So I'd like to look at just getting some definitions of what we mean by voiceover, facial capture, mocap, performance capture. So Adele, can I start with you just to have a look at how you would define voiceover?
Okay, so voiceover is just when you're literally just recording the voice. That's all you're doing. This can be done either with one actor in a room or multiple actors in a room. The next step up is facial, which is when we record the voice and all the facial movement at the same time with a camera. The next step up from that is motion capture, which is really just capturing the body motion. So it's when the people wear the suits and with the balls on, and they're just literally capturing the motion. So sometimes, and then if the actual actor who's doing the voice is also doing the motion capture, that's called full performance capture. But motion capture, it's just the movement, and in some cases voice might be recorded at the same time, but that's likely to be replaced with the actor playing the part in the game.
And Satish, anything that you would add to the descriptions on those?
No, I mean that kind of covers it. Generally, when I introduce the concept to my students, the very technical definition of motion capture is a process used to record live movement and translate it into a virtual environment. Typically for video games, that's I think the less technical translation is and the differentiation for animators to motion capture, people who get involved with that process is. Really, the benefit is you are translating the actor's reaction and nuance and naturalism and realism, as opposed to the very pre-thought out, exaggerated keyframe animation. So, and that applies as well to the facial capture aspect of the process, for me anyway.
Thank you. And we're starting off with just some technical elements, and then we'll get into a more conversational style as we go on, once we've managed to sort of break down a couple of these things. So I think one of the questions which comes up, and so I'm going to start with this one. No spoilers, because I know some people haven't played it and some of us are only part way through it, but The Last of Us Part 2 is getting all of this great feedback. Uncharted's had all of this great feedback. So why are we not doing it all? Why is everybody not doing it like Naughty Dog? Why are we all not doing hours and hours of performance capture? Why are we doing it all in these separate ways as performance? If Naughty Dog does it, why don't we all just do performance capture?
Because it's very expensive.
Thank you. Yes.
But from now on, I'm going to ask myself, what would Naughty Dog do before I make any decisions?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's mega expensive, isn't it? That's why we don't do it. But I think the key thing that they do right, and I think you can bring in, even if you're in a lower budget production, is the fact that the actors are acting off each other. I mean, in a Naughty Dog production, they'll do hours of script read-throughs, and then they'll do hours of rehearsals, and then they'll finally go into the actual capture part of it. But there's even small steps you can do in a low-budget game to get those things right. The first thing is everybody read the script, which would be surprising. Not everybody does. So I really think you need to get everybody at least a copy of the script and read through so you can actually talk about it. The next level up would be actually to have everybody in a room and have a script read through. I think it's not just the actors as well. I think it's really beneficial if the designers, art director, audio team, everybody involved is actually part of that process, because the script is so key to everything else. And if the game designer might be expecting it to work in a different way, and that's when they can flag the problems with the script, and then they can get that changed. So I think you can do steps towards it. The other thing is acting off each other. So even if you're in a single session on your own, just doing voice with nobody else in the room, if you have a director who's covering all those voices, they're able to give you feedback on how they expect the next actor to perform. And if you've already recorded somebody, I personally think you should have all the recordings there to use as feeders, so that the actor, even though they're alone in the booth, can hear what they're responding to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just expensive in terms of the facial capture head-mounted units, which do cost several grand. It adds on to the setup time and calibration and all that kind of thing. But there's also practicalities of, say, you know, if you look at a game like Until Dawn, whereby they had a lot of kind of, you know, high-profile talents, you know, very famous actors and actresses, and it's not always practical. You know, I would say that's Naughty Dog is kind of the gold standard, is getting to do the full performance capture is ideal. You got a lot of naturalistic reactions and you're able to bounce off each other. But, you know, if you're dealing with, say, Hollywood talent, then they may come in and do a few days or a week, you know, on a shoot and try and capture as much as possible. But, you know, a month, 2 months, 6 months, a game can change drastically, a script can change drastically. So they may have to go in and do reshoots. And so sometimes it's just necessary to separate the body from the facial capture as well. So there are, you know, just practicalities as well as combined costs.
And I would say, going back to Adele's very first point about getting the script and reading it, would love to, but as we all know, actors very rarely get the whole script. I think one of the few times I've been given a really start to finish full script was on Assassin's Creed Origins, where I played Aya, and we were filming that when I say filming, that means performance capture, because we're doing the face, the voice, the body on a set in a very Naughty Dog style of filming. But so with that, I got a 250-page document that I read diligently and pored over everything. And then, of course, by the time I got to shooting it 4 months later, everything had been cut. Everything had changed. And I was like, just breathe, it's going to be fine. So I think actors would love to get the scripts in advance, but we are so rarely given that privilege, unfortunately. And I do think it is an unfortunate thing, you know. I understand that gaming companies are they're very protective over their material, of course, but if they want us to do the best job possible for them, which is ultimately what we want to do as actors, right? We want to serve the writers, the directors, the producers, the animators. If they give us the tools to do that, we are so much more empowered walking in, knowing what the scene is, who we're jamming off that day. We are probably in a booth by ourselves, but we might not be, we might have our other actors' lines coming in, but we might not. All this kind of stuff, as much information and as much support as possible is really important, I would say.
I've been director of sessions, and I haven't had the script until the actors walked in, though.
Sure.
You do get some nightmare situations where it's incredibly late. In the defense, though, you know, games aren't films, and whereas in films the script is locked, the shoot is done to that script. With games, things constantly change because the game's QA'd as it's developed, and as they're testing it, they realize that mechanic doesn't work. So therefore the script has to be rewritten. So, I mean, it is so iterative. It's definitely not linear in a film sense of film, shoot, next bit. It's still, you know, sort of like bubbling away right up until the last minute, which is difficult. But I do think even if you've got a script, even if it's not the one you're going in with, at least, even if it's the first draft, you get a feel, don't you? And it helps the character. Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about, adding as much as possible. Yeah.
You'll all notice me flinching at various points too there, because I'm a writer. I failed to introduce myself. My name is Andrew Walsh. I'm chair of the Writers Guild Video Games Committee. I'm also a freelance writer working mainly in games. we are going to talk a lot about the ideal place to be, because, you know, as I said, you'll have seen me flinching a lot because there are many points when you arrive into the studio going, I'm really sorry you got the script late, there were changes. I had written the script, it was finished, and then 2 days before the recording, they cut all of those levels, and then I had to write this. So that does happen quite a lot, but we've sort of started on it as a course. So what would you say if we were dealing in an ideal world, because that's where we want to reach? When would each of you, with your different skill bases, when should you be involved in the process? And in what way? Yeah, let's start with that. What stage should people be contacting you to involve you in the process of bringing the story alive? And you'll see me flinching again with some. A lot of these panels are purely about therapy. It's just about giving informers. And we go through all the points where just like, I wanted the script to be there on time. But in an ideal world, when would you be involved?
Well, my favorite thing was last summer I started a game, and I was kind of involved like as soon as the script was in any way ready to go, and as soon as I was cast. And I actually got to sit down with the lead writer for about 3 hours, and he took me through the whole game and this character's whole journey, and it was amazing. And of course, Adele, circling back to your point, things changed as we were recording, because we were recording for a very long time, and certainly when we were doing pickups and things like that, there were whole new narrative branches that had emerged. But that time with the writer meant that I could really understand her and what she was carrying with her during the game, and therefore who I had to be in the world of the game and in the role. And I think it's fine to change things. I would just, again, circling back to an earlier point, the only thing I think as an actor that I really want a heads up on is on the really big emotional stuff. So deaths, sex scenes, just like your basic big life stuff, right? That's where I'm like, hey, Alex, Thursday, it's the threesome. Yeah, you cool with that? Okay, great. Like, I want to know that stuff before I go into the studio, you know?
Yes.
That kind of stuff.
even on a small level. I mean, this isn't right at the start. Sorry, Andy, I'm going off at a tangent. But I think that's one thing that definitely as a voice director is I'd like actors to be told when they're going to need to shout.
Yes.
Even if it's just a handful of lines at the end.
Yes.
Because it's really awkward as a director to be in there and the actors don't know that they've got to shout at the end and they've got another gig to go to. And I just think it, you know, especially if it's over several sessions, I think we can do more to actually plan what speech is recorded when, so that it's still good for the deliveries for the game team, but it's good for the voice, rather than doing, you know, so like 7 months of recording and then a week of just shouting relentlessly at the end. You know, I think it's really important that things like that need to be flagged.
Yeah.
I can imagine sex scenes, but I'm not an actress, so thank goodness.
Sex scene.
I had a sex scene sprung onto me and I was not very happy about it.
Yeah, there seems to be a thing about people springing the sex scenes onto us. It's sort of a trend, I think.
Maybe it's just because they know you might feel awkward about it, so they're...
But then that's to be negotiated before you do a contract, because don't spring it. Some of us are cool with it. You just need to let us know. Like, it's cool. And it's things like witchcraft, isn't it? It's not something that I wouldn't normally think about, but it's come up in other things, like making spells. Some people aren't down with that, and you need to flag that up very, very early on and just make sure you've got the best person for the role who wants to do that sort of thing. But from a purely audio perspective, because that's where I'm at, I would like the script a week before, just to give you some numbers. That should give me, with other commitments, plenty of time to have a look, to find out, what other people say about me, what I say about them, and then I can be specific and give you an interesting character as opposed to someone saying very general things. Of course, that's more of a narrative sort of element, narrative story kind of thing. If I'm yelling orders, then maybe I'll need to know a different context. But what that does is it maximizes the time we have in the sound booth. So I'm not asking you basic things like, who am I talking to? What am I trying to do? That sort of thing.
I'm throwing the cat amongst the pigeons again. I'm like the bearer of bad news, aren't I, really? But I've also worked with lots of actors who have had this script and they haven't looked at it.
Don't hire them again. Haha, hire us.
I think it's really useful, Adele, that you're bringing in the voice director angle, because so often writers are expected to be voice directors, particularly on indies. And you know, I've worked on projects where it's just me and a writer in a room, and there's nothing coming back. And you know, to have a few skills about direction, even if there is a voice director on the project, just being able to speak the right language, being able to understand what's happening and what's going to happen to your script, is tremendously useful at the writing stage, I think.
I think it's great when I'm actually there with a writer. I've done a lot of sessions recently with a writer on the line, and it's been brilliant to have sort of like this second person. And you know, we've had discussions where I've directed a certain way, and he said, "Gosh, that's totally not what I was thinking when I was writing that, but I really like that." You know, but similarly, he said, "Oh no, that's not what I meant by that bit." You know, so I really enjoy it because you know, otherwise you can just run riot, can't you? But and just put your own splotch on it.
I'm just going to bring it back because we've covered a lot of very useful ground. But Satish, just pulling this out of we've focused a lot on VO. When do you think we need to be talking in the process about mocap and performance capture? Is it only if you've got sex scenes in it, or are there other points? Are there other reasons that we need to be contacting you early about performance and motion capture? When should you be involved in the process?
You know, I think when we talked a little bit earlier about the difference between film and video games, and film is a very linear process. The workflow and the pipeline has been defined over a century, and it's all very linear. And I think the challenge with video games is that it is very dynamic and changing, and that everyone who goes into the mocap volume is prepared in a different way from different studios. So from my point of view, I'm trying to instill best practice to both my game animation future directors as well as actors. So, you know, in terms of preparation, as we were talking before, I don't know if I can really change at what point a game studio wants to get the shoot and the direction involved, and how much advance they're willing to give the actors, because usually it's very short. You know, some actors will get a script on the morning, they'll have an hour to prep, which is not a lot of time to prep. But all I can try and encourage my students and the actors is to prep as much supporting, maybe anonymized material as much as possible. So character bios, concept art if you have it, things like a Spotify playlist, what would the character listen to, anything that can give a bit of a flavor and prepare them. I realized I was probably answering your last question more, but yeah, I mean, I suppose in video games, it's kind of a iterative process. So you might go in and do your primary shoot and then maybe pick up separate body shots later on. So it really depends. It's not as prefixed as, say, cinema and film. It can be, you know, across, you know, several months of pickups as well.
And so when we get you involved, what should we be sending you? Because there's been some useful suggestions there. You know, should we be sending you just the script? Should we be sending you pictures of the character's favorite potted plants? Should we be sending you what's useful and what's not useful for you to receive in the process? And when in the process should you be getting it?
I mean, there's a few practicalities that are very particular, and really, when we talk about sharing a lot of this content, this items, it's a very collaborative effort. So it's not just about a director working with an actor. You know, the director or the animation director might need to have an idea of the level. So maybe there's a level block out. How does that translate into the volume? What kind of props are involved? Is there any kind of like construction of like a helipad, or, you know, what does the blocking and staging involve? So all, you know, the things that I mentioned are kind of desirable. So if I can push for those to be delivered, concept art is really great. A lot of studios will produce tons and tons of great concept art. And if studios are nervous about those NDAs getting broken or information getting leaked, then there's always ways to try and anonymize. Maybe facial details don't really matter. Character bios can be semi-anonymized. You know, it'd be great if animation directors can bring along, say, a little 1 minute edit of what do you want their walk cycle to be like, their posture, their idle pose, any of the stuff that can kind of flesh in a lot of the detail behind all of this NDA if they're not going to disclose what the game is, or the lack of prep time is really going to make the actor get up to speed much quicker.
Can I just say I find the NDA thing super weird, because if I'm in a Marvel movie and I have 2 lines, I know what movie I'm in. And if I talk about it and it breaks NDA, they can sue me into the ground. And I don't see what the difference is in games, apart from maybe to obscure what the budget is or something. Because I just want to say that, like, the reason it's so hard to get your celebrity actors, your A-listers and all that, is because they don't like the obfuscation. They know on paper how much the game industry makes, and then they wonder why they don't know what they're in, and then it just completely puts them off. I don't know why you have these really heavy NDAs, but I find it personally quite off-putting as well. And even if you can't share materials, if it's part of a franchise, I can go and look at another game in the series and sort of see the style that you've got. And again, that helps us all in the studio.
Yeah, I think in terms of NDAs, I think what I've learned from my position in the gaming industry is that the stars are making a lot more money than the working actors. So the NDAs kind of don't really apply to them in the same way to do with fee. I find it difficult when my fee will be negotiated down for a project, and then I will find out it is a AAA title that I'm the lead of, and the budget's $500 million. And I'm like, thanks, guys. That really tells me what you think of your lead actress. In particular, if I was, for example, a lead actress opposite a lead guy, and the lead guy has done 3 games, I've done like 50, and he's making more money than me. That hurts, you know? And that's when I resent when the NDA is used to silence as opposed to protect and form a nice little collaborative artistic pod, when the NDA is actually used for the exact opposite of, you know, protecting and empowering and emboldening the artists, basically. Sorry, I know that the NDA question's slightly aside to what you initially asked, Andy, but it just...
Sorry, I started it.
No, but it's a really important point as well, you know?
It's important for everybody going into the process to know what the issues are for those working in other disciplines. It's very easy to, the word easy, it's very easy to think things are easy for other people, or to walk into their situation not knowing why, when you arrive in the booth, why they look really annoyed, which generally it's not a good start to the relationship overall. No, it's important ground to cover. I think we've had the question through that writers are often overruled by others in the company. They're not always the ones with the power. If we are in a situation as a writer where we aren't able to send you the script, and we don't always have any ruling over the NDA, we need to understand as a writer that we can be the advocate for actors, and we can go to the studio and talk about these things and say, look, if we do this, we're going to end up with actors who are upset. That's not only morally wrong, but it's going to impact the quality of what's going to go on. And people are talking about these things now, so it might well undermine the project as well if they don't understand the moral reasons. So there's lots of things that you can advocate as a writer. But were you in a situation where those things were not being taken on board, or we weren't allowed to send you the script? What sort of things are useful to get early? What sort of things can we be getting you that will help along with the process? And when should we get them to you in the process?
The answer is always as soon as you possibly can. But I think as much as we'd ideally like scripts and so on as soon as possible, we're used to having them thrust into our hands in the booth. And so we have this sort of dual role of being very loose and being happy to sight read, improvise, relaxed, but we also like to have all the information we possibly can. So when we're in the booth, you can sort of drop in our context. So I constantly bang on about context, but it's the W questions. What am I doing? Where am I? Why am I here? Who am I talking to? This is
Where am I
the real
going? What
basic.
do I want?
Yes, I always called these the "I just woke up from a coma" questions. Because
I'm stealing that. That's great. I love that. I'm stealing that. Hi, I've just woken up from a coma. Can someone tell me what's it? Thanks. I'm stealing that.
who's the president? Yeah, you need to know who you're talking to, and that feels so obvious to actors. But a lot of the stuff I try and talk about is the stuff that is obvious to us, but isn't obvious if you're in another discipline. So I always suggest that writers have a go at acting, take an acting class, even if they're terrible, special actually, and experience what it's like to be on the other end and to have writing in front of you that you've never seen before, and say, well, do I like the person I'm talking to? What's happening around me? When is this happening in the game? And really kind of learn what it means to have a bunch of questions. Because the point that Sam made, where if we don't have the answers to the questions, voice actors are really good at making creative leaps with what we have, because you need to make a choice. There's no such thing as a neutral performance. You have to make a choice. And the more neutral you try to be, the more general you become and more bland. And you don't get an original character. So if you can just give us a little bit of an overview of, you've just come out of the shed and you've realised that the dead body in there is your estranged father, and the person meeting you is probably the murderer, go, then yeah, we can probably do something with that.
It's funny you say that, Sally, because I had a situation. I recorded a demo in lockdown, and I got 5 lovely pages of A4 about the last 500 years of this civilization, which didn't help me guide the guy down the corridor and work out if I liked him or not, or if we had a thing going on, or have I done this before? And we didn't have a director, so I hope that worked out all right. I gave three very different reads.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's what you end up doing. If it's a demo, you end up going maybe this or this or this, which is much more time consuming for you.
How many voices can I do in an hour?
And then you get the director or the writer or whoever's looking at these recordings going, well, this is way off base. We're not mind readers.
Yeah.
That's the basic thing, that we haven't worked out a way to reach into writers' minds and pluck out what they're looking for. And I dread that day, I honestly do, as a writer. Because sometimes I don't know what I mean and I'm waiting for an actor to guess. I'm
That's
just
the beauty of collaboration.
That was the thing that Adele was touching on earlier, that sometimes when we do guess, we guess something different than you intended, but it's better. And it's almost like we bring additional things to the process rather than just, verbalizing noises. Sometimes.
I mean, it might be a really obvious thing. The too obvious thing to say is, communicate as much as you can, engage with all the stakeholders on the team, and that sounds like a very obvious thing. But I think something to be aware of, and maybe I've not really spoken about it too much, is like there's such a big cultural difference between each set of groups of people involved in games projects, and I'm not sure if it's really appreciated or maybe navigated as well. We talk about celebrity actors as well, and I get the impression that video games developers are not filmmakers. They don't have that history of working with celebrity actors, and when they have, maybe that the personalities that have got involved aren't used to working with certain actors and with the certain process, or even what was an appropriate format to give actors their script. Give them a big long spreadsheet. It's not always the most fun thing to read, but I do think beyond just saying communicate and talk to whichever stakeholders are involved as much as possible is also be mindful that the different groups of people will have different I don't want to say cultural backgrounds, but different mindsets. So animators are kind of like actors, but they're very insular. So they do want to communicate and bring out a performance, but they're very insular. They're very shy, and so when they talk to actors or maybe animation directors, and actors are very effusive and outgoing. You know, sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. And, you know, I'm sure as writers, you'll be used to a certain position in filmmaking, but in video games, again, you know, I know we're a few decades on now, but it still doesn't feel like it's as mature as cinema. So maybe every other person on a game dev team thinks they're an amateur writer, so they can have a stab. So I think being aware of the difference in culture between, you know, between theatre and film and particularly video games, and how to navigate those personalities will probably help, you know, make that process and hopefully open lines of communication much more. And you do also have to be aware of company politics as well, but being able to navigate all those different things will probably bring us closer to some of those other mediums.
So I think that brings us to a good question. Not again that you see, I'm trying to keep a poker face. So I didn't flinch at all when you said anyone can write, or other members of the team like to get involved. You know, everyone should be involved in the process. But I think all of these skill bases are there. And one of the things that does get said about performance is, can I do a voice, or can my mate do it, or it's a bit expensive, why do we hire an actor? So I'm going to ask the obvious question, just because it still comes up today when in these conversations. Why should I hire you? Why?
Well, I'll tell you what, you can absolutely get your mate to do the voice. And then when you play it back and you realize how bad it is, you can call my agent and then you can get me to come in and do the voice for you. How's that sound?
That sounds great, but I'm not sure people have ears sometimes.
Yeah.
To be honest, I mean, it's the same. Like, I do think with the writing, I think it's changing. I think years ago it was a case that all designers were the writers as well, and I've worked on indie projects now where they're getting people who are specialist writers writing for them. So I do think that's changing, and I think it's changing with the voice as well. I think the main reason people go that way is just because voice is unfortunately really expensive, you know, per hour compared to other disciplines out there. So they just don't understand. I mean, yes, hopefully you do. You totally notice, at least I do, when it's just a mate who's done the voice. But similarly, I had that on another project recently where actors told the creative director, you really need to hire a voice director. And then they asked me, I mean, in a really nice way, I've been told I need a voice director, but what do you do? So, you know, I did explain what I did. And I mean, the fact that it was very complicated because all these sessions were remote sessions. They're all home studio recordings. So because I'm an audio director as well, engineer, I was able to sort of like talk to all the different artists in their different home studios, because every single one sounded completely different, from beautiful professional level quality audio to sounding like they had their head stuffed in a pillow. And, you know, so it was my job to sort of like say, right, let's first of all look at how you're going to set up your studio. Let's see if we can change the acoustics in there. And then the team at Soundcuts, we actually took all the voice recordings and processed them to make them sound like they're in the same space, which probably took longer than actually editing the voice in the first place. But so there was lots of things that just because they didn't know, that needed to be done. It wasn't just a case of somebody recording their voice and that was it. Then the audio team had to come on and sort it all out. And the audio director had to make sure that, you know, they were getting the right feeders and things would sound right in conversation, and making sure they weren't popping and they were on the mic and all the other sort of like technical stuff that goes with it. But what I really loved is the fact that that person phoned me up and said, I've been told this is what I need to do, but I don't know what you do. Tell me what you do. And I mean, luckily they still say it was a great thing that they brought me on board, you know. So I do think people are being educated out there in the same way. Sorry, I just caught the end because unfortunately my Zoom stopped working. I caught the end of Satish when he was talking about Excel spreadsheets and things like that. I think games is very junior and everybody's learning things. You know, games isn't just like high-end stuff. There's loads and loads of indie games out there too. So with the Excel spreadsheets, every single game I work on has a different way of presenting the script to the actress or actor. It has a different way of recording the script. You know, everything that you're never going to get the same thing. And you've got companies doing it brilliantly, and companies are still very old school, and it's on a bit of bog roll, and you know, that's it. So but yeah, so it's, I think that's, but then that's what I like about the games industry, the fact that we are at the start, we're making all this stuff.
I think
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
sorry, go on, Sally.
No, it was just kind of whenever I hear developers kind of going, I know we need a proper voice actor, but I don't know why or what you do. It sort of really vindicates us talking about our jobs. And it always feels very self-involved and very sort of pretentious. Oh, yes, we need our motivations and whatnot. But actually, they don't know. Developers often come from a completely different world from us. And a lot of what these sorts of panels do is break down those barriers and help us sort of step into each other's shoes. And I think writers sit at the sort of in the midpoint there, where they understand the technical elements that need to be fulfilled, but they also want to do the creative side, and they often get stuck in that middle role. Yeah.
I think one of the things actually that this kind of brings up for me, that what Sally's saying and Adele is saying, that Andrew, we didn't really specify at the top. When, do you remember you said, what's a voiceover, what's a perf cap, what's a mocap, what's a facial cap? I personally feel like over the course of the 12 years that I've been doing this or whatever, I think there's more of a distinction now between a voiceover and a voice actor. So the impression I get from the generation above me is that people who were voiceovers used to perhaps do some voices in video games on the side. But now I feel like there is a very clear delineation between a voiceover who might sell you a Mercedes or a TV or a sofa over the bank holiday weekend, and a voice actor. And of course, so many young actors get in touch with me, or actors who've been working for ages and want to break in to this medium. And it always comes back to, I say, okay, they're voice actors. And actually, I feel like the most important part of that word is actually the word actor, because that's what you're hiring us for, is our skill set of imagination, linguistics, communication, emotional flexibility, so on and so forth. So use us for being actors and all of the nuance and intelligences that we can bring to that. Don't think intelligences is a word, but it is now. You can take that. And let us kind of run riot with that, with the acting side of thing. And what we do, you know, Samantha, Sally, and myself, and Adele as well, it's like we just hone in on that voice part, right? If it's a voice acting job, and if you've got me in for a performance capture job, I'll give you all of myself. And if you're giving me a facial capture job, I'll do my face and my voice, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And that'll be the focus. But I really feel like the key word is the actors are acting, the writers are writing, the animators, you know, want to animate. And if they can talk to me about how they're going to do it and how I can make their job easier, I will absolutely do my best to make their job easier. If they're like, hey, you need to hold your weapon here as opposed to there because we can't animate it that close to your body, for example.
I even think there's a bit of, I mean, I might be completely wrong, so tell me if I am. But I almost feel there's a bit of snobbery within the acting community if somebody says they're a voice actor.
Yeah.
That they're not a proper actor. Whereas it's the acting, as you say, to me, the acting is the most important part. Because when you follow commercials and things like that, there's a standard patter in the way they read it. There's an inflection, a lilt. You don't want that, because you want absolute believability.
Yes.
Is what you're wanting. And that is the acting part.
I think with stuff breaking into audio, it seemed to be, for the famous actors out of work, it seemed to be the equivalent of working in the pub. And it was very much, oh yeah, I'm doing this audio bit this week, darling. Because, you know, they can't go and work in the pub, I get it. And it's actually quite hard to break into audio for that reason. But I just wanted to pick up what a couple of people were saying. And I'm going to bring budget into it, because I think if you get proper actors, we'll do it quicker. and therefore cheaper, and you won't need to get us back in. So I had to cast something because I didn't know where to look, and I used a load of very experienced actors. It was for a comedy-based game, so that again you need to have people that can actually deliver on the day. And I think they wanted 2 hours for each in the studio for a very low amount, no buyout. So I got them 1 hour buyout. Everyone did 5 characters, done. Yeah, it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
Everyone was happy.
I was talking more about, I was on one game, and one actor's rate for about a week's worth of work came in at more than what my junior sound designer earned for the year. And the amount that actor contributed was not the same as what my junior sound designer did, because he was in there every single day, working really long hours, but unfortunately that's the rate junior sound designers were getting paid. And it was a really good company. I'm not talking about, we're not talking about on an indie project now. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm saying. Right. If you look at a day rate of a junior sound designer, mid-level, even senior sound designer, hell, even a voiceover director, and then you look at their cost per hour, and then somebody with the budget who's never worked with voice before sees the cost of a voice actor per hour. Mm-hmm. They're like, and I know the reasons why that is. I know the reasons because you're not working every single day, 24 hours a day, and it's the rights to use their voice. But I think that is something that has to be communicated, because I don't think people understand why it's so much. But then there are extremes, like the case I just said, where it was like, really grated with me.
Just to counter that, I just want to quickly say the reason why that's happening is because Equity aren't allowed to set minimum rates with the games industry. We're basing our rates off already existing rates in other industries. Like, we're just giving it a go and seeing what sticks. So you have to sort of work out, what's the usage of this? How would it compare to a commercial? Or is it more of a sort of radio sting and that sort of thing? So it will seem very high. And as someone who's starting to work in tech, in software engineering, the rates for a programmer in C in the tech industry are about a third higher than they are in the games industry. And that's just across the board. So that's why you get your actors who are, A-listers who are dipping their toe and then get really shocked when they see how little they think they're getting paid, because they don't realize that's coming down throughout the rest of the games industry.
Yeah. But I think that's also
a problem.
It is. And I also think that's why you do get indie games with people using their mates, because they can't afford it. They need, say, 10 lines of dialogue, and they have not 2 pennies to rub together. Are they going to spend it on a voice, or are they just going to, or would you prefer a professional voice or no voice? Although they'd feel just some voice is better than no voice. Do you know what I mean? It's really tricky. I know it's.
And I completely disagree with that.
Go on, Sally.
No, I am. This sounds counterintuitive, but I just think if you can't afford to get voice actors in who you can pay properly to do a great job, a game with poor voice acting massively pulls away from what you're trying to do with the game. I have been, in preparation for this panel, playing games with bad voiceovers, with bad voice acting.
I can't believe you're on here and not on Twitch streaming this, by the way.
It would just be me making high-pitched squeaking noises and going, no.
That's not to love.
Yeah, so we're playing things that have a bad. I can talk about what bad voice acting is for about 10,000 years, which I won't bore you with. But when it pulls you out of the story is the shortest version. So a lot of particularly indie developers think voice acting, that's what the big guys do, so we should have to do it, but we also can't afford it, so we'll get Jeremy in the back office to do it. And then they can't, as Adele says, that they don't have the ear yet to hear exactly what's going wrong. They can hear it's not quite right, but at that point you've got to launch the damn game, and everything is blowing up, and you have to get it out there. And then the feedback is always in the reviews. The voice acting is really terrible.
I think the thing is, if you want voice and you can't afford voice, don't just use your mate. I think you've got to look at creative solutions to fix the problem. If you're trying to tell a story, there's got to be other ways that you can tell it apart from through your voice if you can't afford it.
But also you will have actors like myself where I have my rate, which is just my standard rate. And my agents are fully aware that if the right cute little indie game comes to me and they're like, hey, we've got 50 quid. Can we just have you for half an hour for these 30 lines? I'm like, absolutely, you can have me, because I like your game. I like what you're trying to say with it. I like what you're trying to do with it. You know, I think that writers on here, producers, developers watching this, I think they shouldn't be afraid to reach out to the voice actors that they want, that they aspire to having in their game, with a really great pitch. Because at the end of the day,
please pitch. Don't just send us the character, because
yeah,
that's a quick no from me. So.
Exactly. Yeah, don't just send us the character. Exactly. Send us the pitch. Tell me what you're trying to do with this game. Tell me who you're trying to educate. Tell me who you're trying to entertain. Tell me what you're trying to change in the world. Who do you want to make laugh? You know, if you pitch it to me and I am inspired, like I've done indie stuff for free, because I was just like, I can't actually remember what the project was. It was a couple of years ago, but it was for children with special needs. And I was like, I just want to do this for an hour because it fucking matters in the world. So I swore, and we're live. Sorry, Andrew.
Look at you.
There goes the Peggy rating. Yeah. That's all grand. I think what don't go approaching actors for free. I think there are points where you could do it, but just as a general note, that wasn't the takeaway from that moment. But
it's about look. That's also why we have agents, right? Agents filter stuff. That's the point. Do you see what I'm saying? But if someone is really they're young, they're passionate, they're enthusiastic, they've got a great mentor who said, I really believe in this kid, will you look like, those projects will generally find a way of getting to us, and most actors will happily give up half an hour of their time to lend some lines to a game, you know?
I think if in certain cases where, I mean, we've talked about maybe educational projects or charity projects where that might be the case, in most cases, and particularly if you've got a budget for your game and you want story in the game and you want voices in the game, budget that from the start. Because too often it's done as an afterthought, and then people are like, oh, well, we'll approach the actor and see if we can get it to for a tenner.
Yeah.
No, budget it from the beginning as we go through. The good news is, looking at the sharing poll results, we had 37% who got the script on the day, 46% a week in advance, which I have to say, having started working on games in the Stone Age, when we were doing it with sock puppets, the fact that we're up to a week in advance is an improvement, and 36% saying earlier. So looking at some good elements there. Looking at what the script specifically, we've had quite a few questions that have come in about the best way of communicating dialogue in the script. So what writers should be doing when they've got the page in front of them and they've got their imagination running wild. Should they be writing angry, upset, grieving for the loss of their 6-month puppy dog that they've known since they were at such and such an age, and the word is yes? How much information and what sort of information should be put into a script to help lift it? And I'd like to start that from a performance point, because we're covering a lot of VO. I'd like to go to Satish first. What's useful in a script to start from a physicalization of the role and bringing the role alive there, and then I'd like to widen that out to the rest of the panel. This is all great stuff. This is, as a chair, I'm having to do nothing really. This is great. Please keep the information flowing. I'm going to hand this over to Satish, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always keen to try and align the script format to what is most readable and appropriate to actors. So wherever possible, if we can follow that format, that's ideal. And I think, you know, I kind of prefer to, you know, develop a package kind of slightly separate to that. So as I kind of mentioned before, some kind of character bio, concept art, anything that communicates the physicality, the weight, or additional environmental detail, like, you know, environmental concept art. You know, some of those other tools I mentioned, you know, if you've got the time to prep it, can complement a script. So, you know, maybe a short video edit of the kind of characters that inspire this, Spotify playlist, things like that. So, you know, I'm always eager to kind of work towards the format that is most understood and recognized by an actor, and then bring all of the other talents that the studio is probably developing alongside that to help bring that character to life.
And in terms of stuff that actually comes directly off the page, are we talking adjectives and verbs. What type of descriptions or information is useful that when the writer's going through their flow to really put in there, and which might get in the way?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I suppose again, it depends on the structure of the game as well, and that's one of the challenges of games is when you have things like branching dialogues. Then often the context of the scene before can change, which makes it very complex and confusing as well for some actors. But yeah, I mean, if you can set the typical paragraph that gives a simple introduction to who the character is, you can include notes about what their objective is, and I kind of prefer that the directors and actors work through that script and collaboratively interpret it to figure out what is their objection, where are the beats, and how can we bring this to life based on this existing script. So for me, I'm quite happy to work with a very traditional script, the same way that film and TV and theatre might be written, and then fill in a lot of the gaps with the art team, the animation director, the director, and the actor to write up and notarize that script in a pretty traditional way.
I think as much detail as you'd find in a film script, as if you were shooting it. That's the information I'd like to see in there, because it really helps with things like projection and how far away people are. That's something that I'd like to know as a director. Obviously sort of like the mood they're in, but I think generally just setting the scene where it is, what their mood is, because definitely when I work with actors, I think it depends on the actor as to how you direct them. And some of the information I take from the script. So some actors, they're very physical. So I'd be giving them, definitely by this point of the line, you'd have slammed down your sword and you'd be, lifting your arms up, and it would be a very physical description is what I'd give them. Whereas with other actors, it's all about the emotion. So I'd talk to them in a very emotive way. So I need as much detail as possible to set the scene, so that I can give the relevant information or help to the actor who's in the room.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I completely agree. If we can maintain a very recognizable, like, filmic script, that's great. But the difference and the challenge in performance capture is kind of, you don't always know where the camera or the distance from the camera is going to be. So how do you increase or decrease the size of the performance? So again, another complementary item, if you have it, you can bring it and you can work with the animation team, is to get some kind of storyboard. Like, where do you think the shots are going to be? How much of a close-up or medium or wide shot is it going to be? And that might help just kind of change the volume of the performance. These things can always change as well. Like, it's a very difficult thing, and sometimes people go with some kind of middle ground, so it's not too subtle, it's not too big a performance. But if you do have, if you can take that script and work with the animation team and create some kind of storyboard or animatic, that's even better.
I would say also make sure you have enough variations actually written in the script as well. So if it's a line in battle, it really depends how close you are to the opposite person. So if you were going to shout one line, I don't know, like charge, or come on have a go if you think you're hard enough, how far away is that other person? Because you don't know, because in a game, that line could trigger and you could be 10 meters away or 5 meters away, really, really close to that person. So I think if that's the situation, and the camera could be at different distances, that changes the performance of the line, be it mocap or just straight voice acting. I think for me, I'd say write the line 3 times with the separate direction, because otherwise, if it just says one line, 3 variations, that doesn't say to me, small projection, medium projection, massive projection. That says just a slightly different variation on the performance of that one line. Do you know what I mean? So I think things like that, any details about perspective, I'd like to see more of in a script.
I say, give me everything. And then if I throw it out a bit like what Sam was saying earlier about what Sam personally likes to receive, and Sally touched on it as well, like, give me everything, I will know per my personality what I need, what I don't need, what I need to keep, what I can throw out per how I do my job. And then I often find actually that writers are, for me, I find that writers are actually much more open to collaboration and quite flexible, and they want to talk about the dialogue and what they've written, and they quite enjoy it when an actor says something like, oh, hey, well, actually, my mother's Irish, or I speak fluent French, and actually this is more apt to the character and the language, and so on and so forth. And I find that the best directors are the ones who, exactly like you touched on, Adele, can be really flexible per the actor's different needs, per the scene's different needs, know the context of what's going on, who spoke before, how did they deliver the line, where does it fit in, and stuff like that. But there's one thing that I would really just like to share with the group, because I have to help my directors and tell them just this one thing. And it could be, so I'm dyslexic, and it could be because I'm dyslexic that my brain works in a particular way. But when I am being directed, and I share this with all directors that I work with, please do not tell me the mistake that I keep making. Don't highlight my, I'm not going to swear, don't highlight my mistake, highlight the correction that you would like me to make. So for example, if a word is the word blatantly, I always say blatantly, like there's an N in it and there isn't an end, or an N in the word blatantly, and they'll be like, yeah, Alex, you keep saying blatantly. Don't say blatantly, because there's no N at the blatantly. Don't blatantly say that. And I'm like, wait, so you want me to say blatantly? And they're like, no, I just told you not to say blatantly. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to say? Like, focus on the thing you want me to do. And that is a nugget of gold that all directors watch this.
Well, I hope I do that.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
Agree with that. Yeah.
But it's a thing, and I have to. There's a couple.
I'm going to write it down.
There's one director in particular, and it's so funny because every time he works, I'm like, nope, I've told you this. I want you to focus on the thing you want me to do, not the thing you don't want me to do. And it's just how my brain works. But I find it so much quicker and more efficient when the director or the producer goes, the thing I want you to do is bam, because then my energy goes, right, I'm going to focus on that. That's the thing I've got to do. Don't distract my brain with what I've been doing wrong, because that's irrelevant, because we're cutting that, we're not using that. That's my nugget of direction. Actors, what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do.
Andy, can I sort of come back to your question about adjectives? Because it's something that comes up because of the writing, obviously, and the acting. I think what you were talking about was when you have there's possibly some ambiguity around the line, and you can pop in brackets in italics angrily, and it's something of a dual-edged sword. Generally, I don't put that into scripts unless when I've done a pass-through about ambiguity. So if there's a couple of different ways that a line could be interpreted, like, fine, do it your way. If I want to put sarcastically at the front, that will sort things out. But what can sometimes happen is when a writer is worried that an actor is going to run off with the script and do something they don't want with it, and there maybe isn't a director involved, they try to actor-proof a script by putting every last emotion in. And I feel for them as a writer, because it's really hard to let that baby go. But at the same time, we need some space to bring our own things to it. There's also the problem of putting angry, and there are about 10 million references to angry. I've probably been through all of them today. And so you can give sort of a push to avoid ambiguity. But I think if it's a real proper tone change, that needs more of a kind of stage direction-y type thing, where she thinks about how he's cheated on her 7 times already, angrily. And then that gives you more information of how to do it. But yeah, so it is useful, but I think use it sparingly.
Yeah, just a little industry secret there. A lot of us have read the David Mamet book where he says to cross out all the directions, and that's what we do.
I don't do that, but I do reserve the right to do what I call the Mulholland Drive take. which I did recently, where the script was entirely in a really grumpy tone to this man, and the developer said, oh yeah, they used to have a thing but not anymore, she wouldn't touch him with a barge pole. I'm like, cool, I'm going to do the whole thing again, but like I kind of liked it, but it's never gonna happen. And that's a really useful thing to be able to bring to it, that instead of it being all one note, oh this guy again, it's oh this guy again. I mean, no, never again.
But Sally's bringing up a really interesting point that leads into something that Adele was talking about, that goes back to something that Andrew was talking about. We can't talk about scripts and adjectives and adverbs in these scripts without also talking about whisper it, shout it, sexism that comes up in scripts when people are writing for women and female characters. And we're all becoming far more aware of this, of course. But sometimes I will be, oh God, I don't know, I'll be in a studio with 5 men and a script written by a guy that he thinks this is how a girl talks or whatever. And it's just, I'm like, no, this is so far from what we would potentially do. So also trust me, listen to me. And look, at the end of the day, they're the client. I will, if they want me to shout at this guy angrily, I will, because they are the client and I am here to serve their project. But if you also let me share with you my experience of X amount of years as a woman, an actress and a voiceover artist, then you might also discover that I know what I'm talking about. And I might give you I might give you gold, right? If you give me the chance to fly and to prosper, I will give you gold. If you restrict us and keep us in this tiny little box, we can only perform to the size of our cage, you know? So just try it out, because you can always say, stop, let's go again.
So this is where I tend to use audition rules and do my version on the first take. And if the rare times it's been radically different, it's normally brought into it. But yeah, it's not my job to change your script. It's just, I'm trying to do you a favor, because if it doesn't sound like a human being, like, you're the one that's going to get it. It's not me. So at the end of the day, we're supposed to be, you know, telling stories through empathy. So just let me give it a go, as you said, Alex. But I will personally, I mean, another thing I was doing, you know, I was the brain box giving instructions to a guy, but had lots and lots of hesitation in the voice, and that was being translated as being unsure. But then the biog said they knew what they were doing, and so what I performed that as was I was reading it off a list. It says here, you know, rather than I'm too frightened to talk to you, you know. So they had some options, and best, I mean, as actors we can do that anyway, we can bring that in, but I think just maybe from an acting perspective we need to put that on the front of the take, just so they've got that. Because I know how easy it is, especially if you're in a situation with lots of other people, maybe you don't know them, just, you know, put your hand up and ask if you could possibly try something. It might be too late. So my tip is just to try that at the beginning.
I think I'll let you finish, Alex, and I'm going to circle back. No, finish what you're going to say, and I'll circle back.
I always walk into the room or onto the set assuming that the people in that room or on that set with me are the best people at their jobs for the project that we're doing. And I always assume that they want the best for the project, and I hope that they know that I want the best for the project, because I believe very, very firmly that collaboration always brings the best results. I have yet to see this theory be disproven, you know. And there is always, yes, there is the director in charge, and above the director there's actually the producers, and above them is actually the money people. But from a sort of emotional, animal to animal storyteller perspective, whether that form of storytelling is acting or writing or animating or sound designing or whatever, we're all there to bring it to life. So I just assume that people will leave their egos at the door, and we will do our best to get the best, the most wow thing that we possibly can. And it's sad when I'm proven wrong, and it's sometimes quite shocking as well. I literally remember a year and a half ago doing a take on a set, performance capture, and did like 3 in a row, and they were like, the top money guy was like, yeah, we'll go with take 2. And I was like, sorry, take 3 is actually way better, and I can tell you why. And I literally remember him going, oh, didn't know we were paying the actress for an opinion. And I was like, okay, fuck you. So as in, and I don't mean like, oh, sorry, I swore again. Sorry. But what I meant in that FU, I'm like, I really know what I'm doing. You know, I know how to give you the best performance. I know why you liked to. And if you want to go down the road of take two, we can go down the road of take two, and I can give you gold in the take two version. But I promise you that you're missing something by not going towards take three. But so we went down take two, and then I did it better because I got, anyway, it just, yes.
Yeah, because if that was film, you'd be having that'd be allowed. That's a discussion you've been having with the director. You've had rehearsals, and if it's theatre, you know what you're going to do weeks in advance. So I think in games where everything's so sort of can be last second, and you get the script on the day and all that, there's so many problems you might be just sewing in front of you if you make a decision too rashly.
Yeah, but
I think one key thing we are missing too often in games is rehearsal and collaboration, and it's building a collaborative process. I mean, I've worked with directors who have done the David Mamet thing, and I was like, okay, right, I'm just going to go quiet here for a little bit, and then the directors come over and said, so can I just ask you what's happening at this part in the scene? It's like, have you read the stage directions? No, we know it's no. I told you at the beginning of the process. Could you read the stage directions? Oh, right, that's what's going on. Yes, it's a collaborative process where we put this information together and then we shape and we reshape it to find the truth in it. And I think, you know, as a writer, it's not tying people down with angry, embarrassed with every line. It's setting that context out at the beginning of the scene. The bio should give the heart of the character, not the age of the puppy that they had at a certain point in the names of them all, unless that's intrinsic to the character. It's the emotional depth, what drives them, and then the nuance in the scene that allows the actor and the director and the rest of the team to interpret how that being would then deal with that situation. So if they are under fire, you know, we're going to know that there's a possibility that character is going to be scared, but writing scared under every line doesn't inform the performance. The situation of this is a character overcoming the fears of the past in the bio, then confronted with a scary situation, that's when we can start to move through it in collaboration. Anyway, I'm talking now, so I'm going to bring it back to one of the things that you mentioned there about sexism, which is we are going through revelations to some people, truths finally coming out to others in terms of the inequalities, the incredibly bad treatment, the sexism, the assaults that occur, sadly, in this industry. So one of the things I want to circle back to, not just in terms of the changing of performance, when we're looking at this and how that can impact that, and the fact that we need to be talking to people to inform characters, but how do we protect those who are in a vulnerable situation on set? People that are in voiceover booths and being asked to do things, people who are on motion capture and performance capture spaces where some people think that they have the power and that some people are being employed to behave in a certain way. What are the precautions we should be doing to protect performers and ensure that they are in a safe space?
I'm happy to talk a little bit about this just to kick things off, if that's all right, panel. So there are bad men, sorry to use that word, but there are bad men in every industry that we work. And sometimes, yes, there are bad women, absolutely. But I've never been sexually harassed by a woman or sexually assaulted by a woman. So that's just my personal experience. So we have to be very aware that in all workspaces that we're in, that there may occasionally be someone who is inappropriate, who will be sexually assaulting or sexually harassing people. Now, in my experience, I'm going to talk about two things separately. One is being in the booth, and then the other is being on the stage. So when you're in the booth, and having spoken to quite a lot of voiceover actresses over the past couple of weeks as the Me Too movement gained momentum in the video game world, it strikes me, and this is also my experience, that you are a lot safer in the booth because you're literally in a physical space, generally speaking, by yourself. Now, there are some things that do make me feel really uncomfortable. And I think that we always say that the video game industry is so young, it's so new, it's still developing. Well, let's also learn from other art forms like television, film, and theater, where they have codes of conduct that are in place, that are given out to companies and bodies and unions to protect the actors that work in those spaces. We can learn from that, right? So you can tell me a week in advance, for example, when I have a recording session coming up and there's a sex scene in it, and you're going to be required to like do all those sounds, which is a very intimate thing to do. And on the day, what we could do, for example, this is what I ask for now. I'm like, okay, you have to turn off the lights and you can't look at me while I make these noises. But I feel confident enough asking for that now, because I don't think you need 3 men looking at you while you do these things, you know? And I'm very aware that I wouldn't have had the balls to ask for that 10 years ago. And a lot of young actresses won't be able to ask for that. And nor should they have to. It should be a basic thing, whether you've got an NDA or not, that the producer, director, booker, whatever on the job, calls up the agent, speaks to the actress and says, this is what's going to be happening. It's going to be this point of view, blah, blah, blah. This is when we'll be doing it on the day, and this is how we'll make you feel comfortable. That's like one example of being comfortable in the voice booth. And then taking it to the floor with performance capture. And again, I've been speaking to actresses and some very senior female producers in the video game world, actually, about how we deal with this and how we tackle it. And every single female producer that I spoke to made the same point. They said that when you take the actress out of the voiceover booth and you put them on the stage, you're literally pulling back the curtain, you're taking them out of this safety bubble, and suddenly you're exposing them to all the stuff that goes on in everyday life. I remember one incident in particular about 2 years ago. I walked on set, there were 30 men on set. I was the only woman. I was not only the only woman, I was the only actress. And I was spending the next 2 weeks in a skin tight black suit. Like, how do you think that makes me feel? Not great. And then one girl showed up, and I say girl because she was about 23. She was very young. She was very lovely. And I was like, oh yes, solidarity, another woman. And she went, yeah, I've just been hired to put the dots on you because you can't have the guys touch you like that. So I was like, one woman on set that had been hired was to just put things on my body, you know? And I appreciated, yes, that they'd hired a woman to do that, but it felt so glaringly unthought of, you know? And I think that just basic stuff like you don't sexually harass the actresses on set. You don't try to force people, if you're filming away from home, right? You don't try to force people to go to intimate dinners with you to discuss the character, you know? You could just all this like basic stuff that's come up on film and TV stuff, all of that. There's so much of that we can start translating and that we need to start translating. And like to give them their credit, their dues on Assassin's Creed, when we were doing that, there were sex scenes in Assassin's Creed Origins. We had loads of rehearsal time. First, we got the scripts in advance. Then we had rehearsal time. We had closed set on rehearsals just between myself and Abu, who was playing my husband. We knew exactly what was going to happen. And Abu and I were basically allowed to lead it in some ways as theatre actors, basically. But nowadays, I would expect an intimacy coordinator on set. And to be honest, as an actress, I'd probably ask for one, because we have them on film shoots now and TV shoots. So why wouldn't we do them on a video game shoot? To me, you know, all these little things, we need to start talking about them. And men, you are the key. You have the power. You see, and I tell you what, my acting male colleagues have never been pretty much anything other than phenomenal on set. And I will never forget this one creative guy. And he kept being like, come on, we'll go for dinner later. I was filming in a different country. And it was the British male actors around me that I was working with that were calling him out on it and going, dude, that's not appropriate. Like, you know, her time is her own when she gets off set. Yo, mate, you can't say that to her. Like, men, you are the key. You are the secret. You are the biggest ally we'll have. So you need to speak up, all of you, when you say it. Because however uncomfortable it is for you to speak up and challenge those men in positions of power, I can guarantee you it's a hell of a lot more uncomfortable for us being subjected to continuous sexual harassment and sometimes sexual assaults. You know, it leaves us with feelings of low self-esteem, trauma. It's triggering, you know, this whole stuff with the Me Too stuff in games, and now just all these people, you know, it's a lot to deal with as a woman. So men, I'm counting on you to beat down the bad guys.
That's good. If I can bring some stuff from a writing angle on this as well, because I think as writers, we can do a lot to help. And I quite frequently get male writers going, oh, I just can't write women. And then they don't write women characters, and you end up with a cast of pretty much all men and then the love interest. And I can kind of see that this is happening with the Me Too movement that we're having, but the idea is that, oh, I can't possibly know how to not be a creep, so I'll just avoid women entirely. That sort of, well, these women have been treated so poorly, so I should just leave everyone alone and we'll just play with the boys, which is just as bad. So one of the things that you can do as a writer is bring in someone like me, lady person, to have a look at your script and go, oh no, a woman, particularly in this period of history, would never say that, or have you considered doing it this way? And it's not that all women speak exactly the same, of course not, but it's just another pair of eyes, because the problem with unconscious bias is it's unconscious, and it's really hard to unpack this stuff in your own writing, and you need to, if you're a male writer, and actually if you're any writer who's writing for or about a marginalised group, they were talking about it on Monday, get your marginalised writers and voices in early so that they can set things up, rather than bring in later and try and just sand the racism off the corners. Get us in early, get a fresh pair of eyes on it, get us to talk about what our lived experience is. And yeah, and when we do talk about it, listen to us. And go, no, that only happens to you. Only you've been assaulted in this scenario, which we get a lot. Yeah, listen and try not to be defensive. We're not telling you you're a terrible person. We're pointing out an unconscious bias, which is unconscious. So you need us. We're telling spinach in your teeth is what we're doing. But the spinach is sexism. I'm a writer, I should be better at these metaphors. Yeah, so from a writing point of view, bringing in sensitivity readers, having a second writer on board, having somebody like me who's more of a kind of dialogue who judges things up for voice actors. Just the more eyes you can have on it and the more varied the team, that will, I want to say, protect you from being awful. That will help you to become great, and to not.
Oh, sorry. Did we lose you there, Sally? So I think, sorry, I think we've been for a
Oh no!
I think key things, because we're down to the last 10 minutes. So I just want to make sure we're going to do some quick fire questions now, just to cover a couple of things. But I think key to take away from all of this is preparation. And I know sometimes as a writer you can feel that you're not listened to. I mean, narrative can quite often come last, but talking through some of these things with the production team can make quite a bit of difference, because it is often things that aren't thought about. And one of the ways to start to get more influence over the production process is to take these questions to the team. Not all teams are responsive. I know that, and we are talking best practice. I have worked with many teams where you take these things and they go, oh great, and then it's either just put aside for other things, or it's taken as conflict. But I've also worked with a lot of really good teams where you're taking these issues in, and it's actually increased how the narrative is seen within the production industry, because the production process, because they hadn't thought of those issues, and the fact that you're showing that these things exist and they need to be addressed can change the process and start to have an influence. So as a writer, do look at how you can help the narrative process right down to protecting the people that you're working with and building those voices in. Right, we are running short of time, so just to get some quick fire answers in, because we've had a whole lot of extra questions on top of the ones that I've already asked. So Very quick summary, some sentence ones. We talked about pitches to send out to directors, mocap studios. So I'm going to come to you, Satish, first to talk about that. What form should a pitch take when it comes out to a studio to say, this is what we're making, how can you help us? Quick fire answers.
Addressed to who, sorry?
It's coming out to work with mocap team. This is the pitch for the project. This is what we want to do. What do you need in there? What's going to sell the project to you, or what's going to allow you to get the best results?
I suppose the kind of pitches, the elevator pitch that you would pitch a game to from a marketing perspective should be short and snappy enough to get people's attention. And the closer you get to the shoot, the more technical and the more detail about scripts and bios, that can kind of come a little bit later. But, you know, at the very basic level, an elevator pitch will hopefully reel people in. And as you progress, it's an iterative process, so you can drip feed character bios and things like that as we go along.
I'm going to fire these around one by one. So that way, so Alex, you mentioned the word pitch. So I want to come to you for an acting perspective. What's the pitch? How does someone? What's a pitch that the best way to pitch?
I like what we would call a treatment. So maybe like it can be a page, but it can be like 3 or 4 pages about the world and what's going to happen. And in that treatment, I like to feel something, so I know what we're going for. Feelings.
That's great. And that was so fast. That caught me completely by surprise. Adele, I'm going to come to you with a really simple one. She's got that face now because she knows this is not going to be simple. I have got my script ready. I want to work out the budget. How do I work out how much time to allow in the studio so that I can budget it? So that when I come and talk to somebody, how do I figure out a recording rate and what my budget should be?
It's done based on words. You can record a specific amount of words per hour, and that's the way you'd work it out basically. So you'd split up your script into characters, word count per character, then you can work out your hours from that, and then from that it would be a case of adding buyouts on for all the actors as well, and studio time and direction time. And then don't forget post-production, because it takes a hell of a long time to edit it all after you've recorded it. Yes. Do you need specific words per minute? Because it varies from studio to studio and project to project, really. Because yeah.
Get involved with the team early and ask. So send the scripts to the studios early and start to ask them those questions. I think is the way to go, so that they can start to give you that feedback. From an acting perspective, a number of writers have said, I have been stuck with dialogue to write that is a whole lot of instructions. So, what can I do to make those more interesting for the actor in the booth? And what feedback would you give on things that kill dialogue? Samantha, can I start with you for that one?
Yeah. So I mean, sometimes you realise that your character is there to give instructions to the player, and that's why you might want to have an actor that plays games and understands and doesn't get bored. Funny enough, I just have this thing here. It's called actions, and it's what theatre actors use when you have a massive amount of text to make interesting, and it's a thesaurus, basically, right? You find your word, you make it really specific. That's what you're doing. A lot of the time, if you are giving instructions, my motivation is to not get the character killed, or to, you know, humiliate them or something, right? But that should be okay. You should be able to, if you've got a good enough actor, they should be able to make enough variants. And then I found what's more important is volume and pitch and all these technical things that we're talking about, because that's actually what matters in the edit. It's like, you know, if I'm next to the person, it's going to sound very different if I'm shouting down the line. So, oh, go on, Adele, go on, jump in.
No, this is my massive bugbear. It's really important. We have to do these in games. It's something that, you know, the player needs to hear them, and that's why we have to say them. But I do think there's some of the ones from the scripts I've worked with. A lot of these lines are written in not a very natural way. I think I really don't know. I'm not being. This is a serious question. I don't know if it's the writers trying to reduce number of words, but everything seems to be abbreviated. So it's just not natural. And so when the actor performs it, it sounds like a slap in the face. So with all these sort of things, all the instructional dialogue, I always asked actors to add springboards to them, just so that you come off something. So when you edit that springboard off, you get a more natural start and it doesn't sound like a slap in your face every time you hear it. That was my 2p.
Yeah, and just to build on what Adele said, I would also hope that if someone gives me exposition, it's my job to make it sound interesting. So if you give me the space, if you're not too closely wedded to the minutiae of every single bit, then I will make it sound relaxed, natural, interesting. And, but did you think about this? And then if you know, all that, like, we can do that. That's part of our job using the
yeah, I mean, you've completely got to, when you've got a huge amount of exposition, you've really got to vary the pace. Because when you play a game, if something is read at exactly the same pace, people drop off. They stop listening, and then it's like, oh, then they don't know what to do in the game.
But also intimacy, right? Because it's,
yeah, but I don't think it. I think you can write these huge swathes of text, but it's all about the performance and varying the speed, varying the way in which you perform it. It's actually shaping those words to something that's interesting, that the player doesn't, you know, drop off.
Perhaps I could pass on a bit of advice that's given to theatre writers, which is to get the newest, least experienced actors to come and read your text, because it should be quite clear where the deficiencies are. And obviously on the day, get the most experienced actors, because they'll do all the work for you and make it interesting.
And on that note, I have to say thank you very much to everybody. Somebody said in the questions, I really wish this could be a weekly podcast. I'm not sure we could commit to that, but I can't believe that the time has zipped by so quickly, because I'm afraid that we've reached our time limit at the end of the panel. So I will just quickly wrap up. So if I can just remind everybody that this isn't the end of the week as yet. We have 2 more events to go. We have the panels on narrative design tomorrow, which is almost sold out. So if you want to grab a ticket, I would do that soon, because we are reaching capacity on that one. And we have world building on Friday. I would like to thank Fusebox for having sponsored this event and allowed it to come to fruition. The Writers Guild for its continued support of writers across all sorts of different media. We're there for you, so please do consider finding out more information on the link that you've got there. You can see our guidelines, so at any point when you're working in games narrative, please do look at those guidelines to know the rights that you should have. I'll also put out a plea again for you to join the survey. That will be closing in a couple of weeks, so we'd like to get your feedback to help us help you. If you could also, without disturbing your neighbours, because we'll be able to hear you in spirit, give us some banging on the floor and clapping of hands to thank all of our panelists there for their incredible and marvellous, insightful input tonight. It's been fucking brilliant. I have to do that just so Alex isn't alone on this one. So I've upset the Peggy rating as well.
Thank you.
So I can get it into that one as well. Thank you very much all for coming along tonight. It's been excellent to have you. Hope to see you at some more of the events.
See you next week. See you at Games Voice Connect.
Sign up for Game Voice Connect, please. Game Voice. Have I got that right?
Game Voices Connect. Yeah. Game_voices on Twitter. It's the top pinned tweet. There are a handful of tickets. Please come. It's going to be awesome, and you're going to see a lot of these faces again.
Oh, very quickly, Twitter handles, because I did do a slide and now I've switched it off. So you can just you can find me at English Scribe. So I'm at English Scribe, because we get that. I always get emails about this afterwards. So at English Scribe is where you can find me on Twitter.
I'm at Alex Wilton Regan, or one word, at Alex Wilton Regan.
I'm at Samantha Bayart, so the name you're seeing in front of you, and at Game_Voices.
I'm just at Soundcuts, SOUNDCUTS.
I'm at Sally Beaumont 1 as the world's premier Sally Beaumont, and the spelling is on your screen. It's BAUMONT. I spent my whole career spelling that.
And I'm just at Asian Astro Boy.
We saved the best to last, because that is the coolest tag. I'm sorry, everyone else. I'm not. Thank you. Them all. That's great. Thank you very much, everybody. This is the end of tonight's panel. Thank you to everyone involved, and we hope to see you at future events. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.